It all started with a conversation I wasn't expecting. I was out front, taking care of some things around the yard, when Dave, my neighbor, walked over. We've always been friendly, chatting here and there about sports, the weather, whatever came to mind. That day was no different. Or at least it didn't start that way. We were talking, and out of nowhere, Dave mentioned something that made my stomach drop. "Hey, I saw Lisa the other day," he said casually. "She was at that little cafe downtown, you know, the one near Main Street. She was with some guy. Didn't recognize him, but they seemed pretty close." At first, I laughed it off. "Oh, she was probably meeting a coworker or something," I said, trying to sound like it was nothing. But there was a part of me, deep down, that felt something shift. Something wasn't right. Dave didn't push, but he gave me this look, like he wasn't buying it either. "Yeah, maybe," he said. But it didn't really look like work, you know? Those words echoed in my head long after Dave walked away. Didn't look like work. I tried to brush it off. I mean, Lisa could have been meeting anyone. A friend, a client, someone from her book club. But the way Dave said it, the way he hesitated, like he was unsure if he should even bring it up, it got under my skin. I wanted to shake it off, to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was overreacting. But I couldn't. Suddenly, all these little things started to stand out. Lisa had been staying late at work more often. She'd been a bit more secretive with her phone. Nothing obvious, just subtle changes I hadn't thought much about until now. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to let Dave's words take root in my mind. But it was too late. I tried to go about my day, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. It felt like a small crack had opened in the trust I had in Lisa, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I could feel that crack growing. I kept replaying the conversation over and over, the way Dave looked at me, the way he hesitated before speaking, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me. It made me wonder, was I missing something right in front of me? Was there something Lisa wasn't telling me? I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to be the kind of person who doubted his partner without a good reason. But once that seed of doubt is planted, it's hard to unsee the things you start to notice. And that's when I realized maybe I'd been too confident, too sure of our marriage. Maybe I'd been too trusting. After that conversation with Dave, I felt like I was living two lives. On the surface, everything looked the same. I went to work, came home, had dinner with Lisa. We talked about our days, watched TV together, laughed at old inside jokes. But beneath the surface, there was this growing tension, a storm brewing in my chest that I couldn't shake. Every time Lisa smiled at me, every time she reached for my hand, I felt a pang of doubt that hadn't been there before. I hated it. I hated myself for even questioning her, for letting one comment from Dave get under my skin. But it was more than that now. It was in her late nights, the way she seemed distant sometimes, how she'd smile at a text and put her phone away quickly. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if those things had always been there or if I was just seeing them differently now. I remember one night, lying in bed next to her. She had fallen asleep, her breathing soft and steady, and I was just staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was drowning. I turned over and looked at her, wondering if I even knew her anymore. The woman lying next to me, was she really the person I thought she was? Or had I been fooling myself this whole time? The thoughts kept coming, relentless, like waves crashing over me. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that there was nothing to worry about. But it didn't work. My heart raced every time her phone buzzed, every time she said she was staying late at work. I could feel myself spiraling, and I couldn't stop it. One day, I was in the kitchen, trying to make dinner, and I just broke. I couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. I grabbed the cutting board, the knife, and just stood there, staring blankly. I felt my chest tighten, my throat burn, and before I knew it, tears started streaming down my face. I put the knife down and just leaned over the counter, my hands trembling. It felt like I was losing my mind, like my whole life was slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand answers, but the fear stopped me. What if it was true? What if she really was seeing someone else? Once I asked, there'd be no going back. The bubble would burst and everything would change. And so, I kept pretending. I kept trying to smile, to act normal, while my heart felt like it was being torn apart. The weight of it all, the doubt, the fear, the anger, it was like I was carrying a burden that was slowly breaking me down, and I had no idea what to do. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be the man I thought I was, the one who didn't let his emotions get the best of him, the one who had everything under control. But inside, I was falling apart. And the worst part? I couldn't even tell if I was imagining it all or if my entire world was about to come crashing down. Once I started to accept the possibility that Lisa might be cheating, something inside me began to crumble. It wasn't just about her. It was about me. I felt like everything I believed about myself had been ripped apart, like the foundation I'd built my entire life on was collapsing under me. I couldn't help but ask myself the same questions over and over again. Why wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? What did this other guy have that I didn't? Those thoughts became like a broken record in my mind, playing over and over until I could barely stand it. I'd look in the mirror, and all I'd see were the flaws I had spent years trying to ignore. Maybe I wasn't successful enough. Maybe I hadn't done enough for her. I started thinking about all the times I worked late, the times I didn't have enough energy to plan a date night, the times I just assumed she was happy because I was. Every little thing I'd done, or hadn't done, began to feel like a reason for her betrayal. I blamed myself for not being better, for not being the man she needed me to be. I started comparing myself to the mystery man, the guy Dave saw her with. I didn't even know who he was, but in my mind, he was everything I wasn't. He had to be more successful, more charming, more confident. He had to be someone who could give her what I couldn't. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt myself shrinking, losing any sense of confidence I once had. Even at work, I felt it. I'd be sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a project. But the doubts would creep in. Why are you even bothering? You're not good enough. You couldn't even keep your wife happy. It was like a dark cloud hanging over me, following me everywhere I went. I started making mistakes, losing focus, and feeling like a fraud in every part of my life. Lisa would come home, and I'd force a smile, pretending like everything was okay. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. I'd watch her from across the room, wondering what she saw when she looked at me. Did she see a failure? Did she see a man who wasn't enough for her anymore? I hated feeling that way, so small, so insignificant. But I couldn't help it. There was one night when it all came to a head. Lisa had gone out again, saying it was just a work thing, and I was left alone in the house. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at our wedding photos on the wall. We looked so happy back then, so full of hope and love. And I just broke down. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I'd let both of us down, like I wasn't the man I promised her I'd be. The worst part was that I started to believe it. I started to believe that maybe I didn't deserve her, that maybe this was my fault, that I hadn't been enough. It was a dark, empty feeling, one that left me questioning everything about myself, my worth, my value, my ability to be loved. And in those moments, I felt completely alone, convinced that nothing I did would ever be enough to change how broken I felt inside. It's hard to describe the moment when everything you've been dreading turns out to be real. I remember the night I found out, like it's burned into my memory. Lisa was in the shower and her phone was on the kitchen counter. It wasn't something I planned. I was just standing there, staring at it. I felt like I was in a trance, the world around me fading, until all I could see was that screen. I wanted to be the kind of person who respected privacy. I wanted to believe that there was nothing to find, but the doubt, the suspicions, they had grown too much. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling as I picked up her phone. I hesitated for what felt like an eternity, my finger hovering over the screen. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm right? Either way, my life would never be the same. I unlocked her phone, scrolling through her messages. At first, it was normal. Chats with her co-workers, friends, even my own name in there. But then I saw it, a name I didn't recognize. Evan. My stomach dropped. I clicked on the thread, and that's when everything fell apart. The messages were all there, clear as day, flirty, intimate, talking about meeting up, sharing moments that had nothing to do with work or friends. My eyes scanned the words, each one hitting me like a dagger to the chest. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. My hands shook as I read them, my breath catching in my throat. I felt like I was in a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. I could barely breathe. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I kept scrolling, reading message after message, feeling my heart break more with every word. All the pieces started to fall into place. The late nights, the secrecy, the distance between us. It was all right there, staring me in the face. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until I heard the shower turn off. Panic set in. I put the phone back on the counter, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I stood there, trying to catch my breath, trying to keep myself from breaking down right there in the kitchen. Lisa came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I couldn't look at her. My stomach churned, and I felt a mix of emotions: rage, heartbreak, disbelief. She walked up to me, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and asked what I wanted for dinner. Her voice was so casual, so normal, and it made me sick. How could she act like everything was fine when she had this whole other life behind my back? I muttered something about not being hungry and walked away. I couldn't stay in the same room with her. I went to the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. It was real. The thing I had feared the most. The thing I had tried so hard to deny. It was all real. I remember sitting there, feeling like my heart had been ripped out. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to, or even how to process what I had just seen. I felt broken, like my entire world had just crumbled beneath me. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea how I was supposed to move forward. The days after discovering those messages were some of the hardest I've ever had. I tried to keep it together, tried to go about my daily life, but it felt impossible. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw those texts in my mind, heard her laughing with him, read the words that cut into me like a knife. It was eating me up inside, and I knew I couldn't pretend forever. I had to confront her. One evening, after dinner, I decided it was time. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding, as I sat across from her at the table. She was scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Lisa," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." She looked up, startled by my tone. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I could feel the anger, the pain rising inside me, and I knew I couldn't hold back anymore. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I know, Lisa. I know about Evan." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The color drained from her face, and her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I watched as the realization hit her. She knew there was no denying it now. I saw her swallow hard, her hands trembling slightly as she put her phone down on the table. "How long?" I asked, my voice cracking. "How long has this been going on?" She looked down at her hands, her eyes filling with tears. "A few months," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant for it to get this far." Her words felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. "You never meant for it to get this far," I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me for months, Lisa. How could you do this?" I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, the rage and sadness mixing together, making it impossible to keep my emotions in check. She started crying, her shoulders shaking as she tried to explain. "I don't know, Mark. I felt like we were drifting apart. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. And then Evan, he just listened. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry." I shook my head, the pain cutting deeper with every word she said. "You should have talked to me, Lisa. You should have come to me, not him." My voice broke, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I thought we had something real. I trusted you." She reached across the table, her eyes pleading. "I know, Mark. I know I messed up. I don't want to lose you. Please, we can work through this." I pulled away, standing up, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't know if we can, Lisa. I don't even know if I can look at you right now." My heart was pounding, my chest tight with the weight of the betrayal. I turned away, walking toward the door. "I need some space. I can't do this right now." As I walked out of the room, I could hear her sobbing behind me, calling my name. But I kept going. I needed to get out, to breathe, to clear my head. I felt like I was drowning in everything, her lies, my pain, the shattered pieces of the life I thought we had. And in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. After that night, it felt like I was living in a haze, like everything around me had lost its color and meaning. I was going through the motions, but none of it felt real. I'd get up in the morning, make coffee, go to work, but inside, I felt completely empty. It was like the world had moved on, but I was stuck, frozen in that moment when everything fell apart. There were times when I felt like I was on the edge of breaking down. I'd be driving to work, and a song would come on the radio, one that Lisa and I used to love, and suddenly, I'd feel my chest tighten, tears welling up in my eyes. I'd pull over to the side of the road, just sitting there, trying to breathe, trying not to let the sadness swallow me whole. It felt like the memories were everywhere. Every street, every restaurant, every corner of our house was filled with echoes of what we used to be. And the worst part was the nights. When the sun went down and everything got quiet, that's when it hit the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness next to me where Lisa used to be. I could still hear her laughter in my mind, remember the way she used to curl up beside me and it made the silence unbearable. I'd toss and turn, unable to sleep, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering where it all went wrong. Some nights, I'd get up and walk around the house, looking at the photos we had on the walls, the pictures of us smiling, happy, oblivious to the storm that was coming. I'd find myself staring at them, feeling this deep ache in my chest, like a part of me had been ripped away. I missed the life we had, or at least the life I thought we had. It was like I was grieving, not just for Lisa, but for the future I thought we were going to have together. There were moments of anger too, moments when I'd feel the rage bubbling up inside me, thinking about Evan, thinking about how Lisa had lied to me, how she'd made me believe that everything was okay while she was living a double life. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain go away. But no matter what I did, it was still there, this heavy, crushing weight that wouldn't let up. I tried to keep it together when I was around other people. I'd put on a brave face at work, smile at my co-workers, pretend like everything was fine. But I could see it in their eyes. They knew something was wrong. I'd catch them glancing at me, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. It made me feel even more alone, like I was stuck in this nightmare that no one else could understand. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know if I even wanted to. All I knew was that the life I had known was gone, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces or where to even start. It felt like I was lost, drifting through the days, just trying to survive, trying to make it to the next moment without falling apart completely. I can't even count the number of nights I spent pacing back and forth, trying to make sense of everything, trying to decide what the hell I was supposed to do. The thought of leaving Lisa felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but staying felt just as painful, like I was betraying myself by pretending things could ever go back to the way they were. I was torn, stuck in a limbo that seemed endless. Every time I looked at her, I felt a flood of conflicting emotions: love, anger, sadness, and confusion. It was exhausting. One minute, I wanted to forgive her, to believe that maybe we could work through this, that maybe love could be enough. I'd think about all the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the plans we'd made for the future. I'd remember her smile, the warmth of her touch, and I'd feel this overwhelming urge to fight for what we had. But then, just as quickly, the anger would rush in. I'd think about all the lies she told, the nights she spent with him while I sat at home, clueless. I'd think about the way she betrayed me, and it made my blood boil. How could she do this to us? To me? How could she claim to love me while sneaking around behind my back? I'd look at her and feel a rage so deep that it scared me. How could I ever trust her again? How could I look at her without seeing those messages, without imagining her with him? It was like I was caught between two versions of myself, the man who wanted to forgive and the man who wanted to run as far away as possible. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in my head, trying to figure out how we got here. I'd ask myself over and over again, should I stay? Should I leave? The questions echoed in my mind, louder and louder until it felt like they were drowning out everything else. There was one night in particular that I remember vividly. Lisa had fallen asleep on the couch, and I was sitting at the dining table, staring at a half-empty bottle of whiskey. I could hear her soft breathing, the sound that used to comfort me, but now it just felt like a reminder of everything we'd lost. I picked up our wedding photo, my fingers tracing the edges of the frame. We looked so happy, so in love. I wanted to go back to that moment, to pretend that none of this had happened, But I couldn't. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same. Even if I stayed, even if we went to counseling and tried to rebuild, it would always be there. The betrayal, the lies. I'd always wonder, always doubt. The trust was shattered, and no matter how much I wanted to believe we could fix it, I knew that I could never see her the same way again. Tears filled my eyes, and I felt this deep, aching sadness settle over me. I had loved her with everything I had. I had given her my heart, my trust, my future, and now I was left holding the broken pieces of a life that no longer existed. And as much as it hurt, I knew what I had to do. I had to let go. I had to leave, not because I didn't love her, but because I loved myself enough to know that I deserved better. It wasn't an easy decision. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But in that moment, staring at our wedding photo through tear-filled eyes, I knew that staying would only keep me trapped in the pain, and I couldn't live like that anymore. I had to choose me, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. Once I finally made the decision to leave, I realized that I couldn't do it alone. The weight of everything was just too much, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I needed to reach out. I needed to talk to someone, to hear someone tell me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that I was doing the right thing. I called my best friend Tom one evening. He picked up after a few rings, and the moment I heard his voice, I felt my resolve cracking. "Hey man, you okay?" he asked, sensing that something was wrong right away. I tried to hold it together, but I couldn't. The words just came spilling out. About Lisa, about Evan, about everything I'd been feeling. The anger, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights. Tom listened, and when I finally stopped, he was quiet for a moment. "Mark, listen to me," he said, his voice steady, full of empathy. "You didn't deserve this. None of this is your fault. Lisa made her choices, and you've got to do what's best for you now. You're stronger than this, man. You'll get through it. I know you will." Hearing Tom say those words, I felt this wave of emotion come over me. It wasn't like everything was suddenly okay, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a little less alone. I wasn't carrying this burden by myself anymore. The next day, I went to visit my parents. I'd been putting it off because I didn't want them to see me like this, broken, vulnerable, a mess. But I knew I needed them. When I walked through the door, my mum took one look at me, and I could see the concern in her eyes. "What's going on, sweetheart?" she asked. And before I could even answer, she pulled me into a hug. I broke down. Right there in my mother's arms, I let it all out. The pain, the betrayal, the fear of what was to come, it all poured out of me, and she just held me, letting me cry. My dad was there too, his hand on my shoulder, his face lined with worry. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. Just having them there, knowing they were by my side, made all the difference. After I told them everything, my mum looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Mark, you're going to be okay," she said. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're strong, and you're going to get through this. We're here for you, no matter what." My dad, always the practical one, nodded. "It's not going to be easy, son, but you're doing the right thing. You deserve to be happy, and if this is what it takes to find that, then we're behind you all the way." Their words gave me a strength I didn't know I had. It wasn't just about leaving Lisa anymore. It was about finding myself again, about rebuilding my life with the people who truly cared about me by my side. I started reaching out to a few more friends, people I trusted, and every time I told my story, It felt a little bit lighter, a little less suffocating. Their reactions varied. Some were furious on my behalf, others offered calm words of wisdom, and a few just listened, letting me vent without judgment. It didn't fix everything, but it helped me feel less alone. It reminded me that I wasn't defined by what Lisa did, that I had people who believed in me, who saw my worth even when I couldn't. With every conversation, I felt a tiny bit stronger. I wasn't there yet, not by a long shot, but I was starting to see a path forward, one that didn't involve Lisa or the pain she had caused. It involved me, my friends, my family, and a future that was still mine to create, no matter how broken I felt in the moment. After leaning on my friends and family, I realized that I needed to find a way to move forward, not just emotionally, but in every aspect of my life. I couldn't keep letting this betrayal define me. I needed something to focus on, something to pour myself into, something that wasn't tangled up in the mess of my broken relationship. So I turned to work. I started going in early, staying late, taking on more projects than I ever had before. My office became my sanctuary, a place where I could shut everything else out and lose myself in something productive. Every time I felt the pain creeping in, I'd bury myself in my work, channeling all the anger, the sadness, the confusion into something I could control. I set new goals for myself, things I hadn't dared to dream of before. I wanted to push my limits, to prove to myself that I was still capable, still strong, despite everything that had happened. I took on challenging projects, led meetings I used to shy away from, and even started attending workshops to build new skills. It was like I was trying to rebuild myself, one task at a time. There was one night, a few weeks after I decided to leave Lisa, when I stayed late at the office, working on a presentation that was due the next day. It was just me, the dim glow of my desk lamp, and the quiet hum of the office. I remember looking around, feeling the emptiness of the space, and for the first time, I didn't feel the overwhelming loneliness that had been haunting me. Instead, I felt a sense of purpose. I was doing this for me, for my future. I was taking back control of my life. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when everything would hit me like a wave, when I'd be in the middle of a project, and a memory of Lisa would flash through my mind, bringing with it a pang of sadness. But instead of letting it consume me, I'd take a deep breath and refocus. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me, for the man I wanted to become. And the more I threw myself into my work, the more I started to see results. My boss took notice, commending me for my dedication and drive. I got assigned bigger responsibilities, and with every success, I felt a little bit of myself coming back. I felt stronger, more capable, more in control. It wasn't just about the work. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the pain, that I could take the worst thing that had ever happened to me and turn it into something positive. There was a moment when I stood in front of a room full of colleagues giving a presentation, and I realized that I wasn't thinking about Lisa or Evan or the betrayal. I was focused, confident, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. I felt like I was more than just the man who'd been cheated on. I was someone who could still achieve, who could still grow, who could still find strength even after everything had fallen apart. And that realization that I still had power over my own life, that I could still carve out a future for myself, was the first real step toward healing. As the weeks turned into months, I started to notice a shift within myself. I had poured everything into my work, and in doing so, I had found a small piece of myself that I thought was lost, but I knew that if I truly wanted to heal, I couldn't just focus on my career. I had to face the deeper wounds, the ones that Lisa's betrayal had left behind, the ones that made me question my worth, my ability to trust, and my ability to love again. I started seeing a therapist. It wasn't something I ever imagined myself doing. I always thought I could handle things on my own, but I realized that I needed help to untangle the mess of emotions that had been holding me back. The first few sessions were tough. Talking about Lisa, about everything I felt, brought up all the pain I had tried to bury. But slowly, I started to feel lighter. I began to understand that what Lisa did was not a reflection of me. It was her choice, her mistake, and it didn't mean that I was unworthy of love or trust. It was a long process. Trust had been shattered, and rebuilding that wasn't going to happen overnight. I began by working on trusting myself again, learning to trust my own instincts, my own decisions. For so long, I had doubted myself, questioned whether I was good enough, whether I had missed something obvious, whether it was all my fault. Therapy helped me realize that those doubts weren't the truth. I started to believe in myself again, little by little. I also started opening myself up to other people. At first, it was just small things, saying yes when friends invited me out, accepting an offer to grab a drink after work, being around others without feeling the need to put up a wall. I had spent so much time shutting people out, afraid that they'd see my brokenness, but I was beginning to understand that vulnerability didn't mean weakness. It meant allowing others to be there for me and letting myself be seen for who I really was. Eventually, I met someone. Her name was Rachel. It was nothing dramatic, no big moment, no sweeping romance. We met at a friend's gathering, and I remember being drawn to her kindness, her warmth. She was easy to talk to, and she didn't push for anything more than I was ready to give. At first, I was guarded. I didn't know if I could ever trust someone again, if I could open up without the fear of being hurt. But Rachel was different. She understood, and she never tried to rush me. Slowly, I found myself opening up to her. I told her about Lisa, about the betrayal, about the heartbreak. She listened without judgment, without pity, just empathy. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in again. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when the fear crept in. Moments when I'd wonder if I was making a mistake, if I was setting myself up for more pain. But with Rachel, those moments started to fade. She showed me that trust didn't have to be given all at once, that it could be rebuilt, one small step at a time. And as I began to trust her, I realized that I was also learning to trust myself again. I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was no longer just the man who had been betrayed. I was someone who had faced the pain, who had chosen to heal, who was willing to take a chance on love again. And that more than anything was a sign that I was finally beginning to move forward. Meeting Rachel was something I never saw coming. After everything with Lisa, I had convinced myself that love just wasn't for me anymore. I didn't think I could ever let someone in like that again. Not after what I'd been through. But life has a funny way of surprising you, even when you've lost all hope for new beginnings. It was a mutual friend's barbecue. One of those events I almost didn't go to because I couldn't stand the idea of being around happy couples, friends, and laughter. But something inside me pushed me to go, even if just to get out of my own head for a few hours, and that's when I met her. Rachel was standing by the grill, chatting with a group of people, and she just radiated warmth. There was something about the way she laughed, the genuine way she spoke to people that drew me in. Our friend introduced us, and we started talking. I don't even remember what we talked about at first, probably something light and meaningless, but I remember feeling at ease, like I didn't have to put on a mask, like I could just be myself for the first time in a long time. She didn't know my story. She didn't know the mess I'd been through, and I didn't feel the need to tell her right away. We exchanged numbers, and I figured it would probably end there, just another friendly encounter. But the next day she texted me just a simple, "Hey, it was great meeting you. Want to grab a coffee sometime?" I hesitated at first. I didn't know if I was ready for this, if I could handle the risk of letting someone in again. But something told me to give it a chance, so I said yes. Our first coffee turned into a long conversation. She was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in what I had to say, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could actually open up. Not all at once, not about everything, but slowly. Rachel wasn't pushy. She didn't need me to be perfect or to have all the answers. She just wanted to get to know me, and that was enough. We started seeing each other more often. Dinners, walks in the park, even just sitting on her porch, talking about life. I hadn't felt this kind of connection in so long, and at first, it scared me. I'd find myself holding back, hesitant to let her in too far, too fast. The memories of Lisa's betrayal were still there, lingering in the back of my mind, reminding me of what could happen if I let myself be vulnerable again. But Rachel had a way of breaking down those walls without even trying. She was patient, understanding, and she never pressured me. She knew I had been hurt, though I hadn't told her all the details, and she let me take things at my own pace. It was in the little things. The way she'd look at me when I was talking, like she genuinely cared. The way she'd listen without interrupting. The way she'd hold my hand, like she wasn't afraid of my scars. One night, we were sitting on her couch, just talking, and I realized I hadn't thought about Lisa or the betrayal for hours. I was present, fully there with Rachel, and it hit me how much things had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I wasn't holding on to the pain, letting it dictate my every move. I was allowing myself to feel joy again, to trust again, even if it was just one step at a time. Eventually, I told Rachel about Lisa, about everything that had happened. It was late, and we were watching a movie, and I just felt this need to tell her, to let her see all of me. She listened quietly, holding my hand, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she didn't say much. She just leaned in, kissed me softly, and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." In that moment, I knew that I could love again. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be moments of fear, moments when the past tried to creep back in. But with Rachel, I felt like I had a chance at something real, something honest. And that was all I could ask for. Looking back on everything now, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were moments, right after everything with Lisa, when I couldn't see a way forward. I felt like my life had crumbled beneath me, and I was lost in the wreckage, trying to make sense of who I was without the future I'd always imagined. But here I am, standing on the other side of it all, stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I ever thought I could be. Meeting Rachel wasn't the happy ending I was searching for. It was a new beginning, one I didn't even know I needed. It taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be worth it. It can be messy and full of fears, but it can also be beautiful if you're willing to be vulnerable again. Rachel showed me that I could be loved for who I truly am, scars and all. And that's something I hadn't dared to believe after Lisa. It wasn't just about finding someone new. It was about rediscovering the part of me that could love again. But this journey wasn't only about love. It was about discovering my own strength, proving to myself that I could rise after falling. In the beginning, I poured everything into my work as a way to cope, to survive. But as time went on, it became more than that. It became a passion, a way to challenge myself, to grow, to become someone I could be proud of. And I did. I pushed myself, took risks I wouldn't have taken before, and it paid off. I found success in my career, but more importantly, I found a sense of purpose, of accomplishment, that had nothing to do with anyone else's validation. I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that life doesn't always go the way we plan. The dreams we build, the people we think we'll grow old with, sometimes they don't last, and sometimes they shatter in ways we never saw coming. But that doesn't mean it's the end. It means there's a new chapter waiting, a new story to be written, one that can be even more beautiful than the one before. I won't say that the pain is completely gone or that I don't think about Lisa anymore. There are still moments when the memories come back, when I wonder how things could have been different. But those moments are fewer now, and they no longer define me. They're just a part of my story, a part that led me to where I am today, with a career I'm proud of, a love that's real and honest, and a future that feels bright. I've realized that true strength isn't about avoiding the pain or pretending it never happened. It's about facing it, feeling it, and choosing to rise anyway. It's about allowing yourself to heal, to trust, to love again, even when you're scared. And that's what I've done. I've chosen to rise, and I've chosen to live fully, embracing the uncertainty, the imperfections, and the beauty of what comes next. Standing here now, with Rachel by my side, I know that I'm not the same man I was before. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. And that, more than anything, is what true success looks like to me.